There is a terrifying reason for all the disappearances in the Alaska Triangle. The events I'm about to describe transpired in the unforgiving wilderness of the Alaska Triangle, a region notorious for its inexplicable disappearances and eerie occurrences. I had heard the tales, of course, but like most, I dismissed them as mere legend. Until, that is, my wife and I found ourselves entangled in a nightmare that defied all rational explanation. It was late September when Laura and I decided to embark on a hiking expedition through the dense forests and rugged mountains of the Triangle. An experienced outdoorsman, I relished the challenge, and Laura, a nature enthusiast, was equally eager to explore the untouched wilderness. Our plan was to follow the unmarked trails and camp under the vast Alaskan sky, absorbing the raw beauty of the land. Little did we know that our adventure would soon morph into a harrowing ordeal. The first few days were uneventful, filled with crisp air, towering pines, and the occasional distant howl of wolves. We made good progress, covering miles of terrain each day. But on the fourth day, we stumbled upon something that gave us pause. Deep within the forest, we found an old, dilapidated cabin, seemingly abandoned for years. Its roof sagged under the weight of creeping moss, and its windows, long shattered, were mere gaping holes in the wooden structure. Curiosity piqued, we ventured inside. The air was musty, thick with the scent of decay. Across the floor were remnants of what appeared to be a research station, yellowed maps, notebooks filled with scribbles, and archaic scientific equipment. The journals detailed expeditions into the Triangle, with the final entries becoming increasingly erratic and incoherent, filled with sketches of a monstrous creature that defied description. The creature was depicted as a massive, gnarled tree with limbs that twisted and writhed like serpents, its bark covered in thick, black moss, and its eyes glowing a malevolent green from hollow knots. As we perused the journals, a sense of unease settled over us. We couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I scanned the tree line. But there was nothing, just the oppressive silence of the forest. We decided it was best to move on, though the cabin's disturbing aura lingered with us. That night, we set up camp a few miles away, in a clearing by a stream. The fire crackled, and the stars emerged one by one, a comforting reminder of the normal world beyond this cursed land. We tried to focus on the warmth and light, pushing the unsettling images from the journal out of our minds. Sleep came fitfully. We were awakened by a strange noise, a low, guttural growl, unlike any animal we had ever heard. My heart pounded as I reached for my flashlight and rifle. The growl grew louder, closer, accompanied by the sound of heavy, deliberate footsteps. I scanned the darkness, my beam of light cutting through the night, but saw nothing. And then, just beyond the periphery of the light, I caught a glimpse of movement, a shadow impossibly large and swift. Panic surged through us. We quickly doused the fire and gathered our gear, deciding to keep moving through the night. We couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was out there was stalking us, its unseen eyes never leaving us. The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees twisting into grotesque shapes in the darkness. We walked for hours, driven by sheer terror. The growls would come and go, always just out of sight. As dawn approached, we stumbled into another clearing, this one dominated by a towering stone monolith covered in strange, ancient carvings. Exhausted and desperate, we decided to make our stand there, the monolith's presence providing a strange sense of security. As I examined the carvings, I realized they depicted a creature, the same one from the journal. A massive, tree-like beast with gnarled, twisting limbs and eyes that seemed to follow us no matter where we stood. The legend of the creature, known as the Aluxot, flashed through my mind, a malevolent spirit said to lure people to their doom in the wilderness. Suddenly, the growling returned, louder and more menacing than before. We turned and saw it, a massive, shadowy figure emerging from the trees. Its bark-covered body was twisted and contorted, with branches jutting out like grotesque appendages. Moss dripped from its limbs, and its eyes glowed an eerie green from deep within hollow knots. I fired my rifle, but the bullets seemed to pass through it as if it were made of smoke. It advanced on us, its eyes burning into our souls. Just as it was about to strike, it reached out with one of its twisted limbs and grabbed Laura, dragging her away into the forest. Her screams echoed in the night, mingling with the growls of the creature. Desperation and fear surged through me as I tried to follow, but the forest seemed to conspire against me, the trees closing ranks and blocking my path. I shouted her name, my voice hoarse and raw, but there was no response. I spent hours searching, but it was as if she had vanished into thin air. Exhausted and defeated, I made my way back to the clearing, the monolith's silent presence a haunting reminder of my failure. I stumbled out of the forest and made my way back to civilization, haunted by the image of Laura being dragged away by the monstrous tree. The days turned into weeks, and the memory of that night haunted my every waking moment. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think of anything but finding her. I delved into research, seeking answers in the ancient folklore and legends of the region. I learned that the Aluxot was an ancient guardian of the forest, twisted by centuries of suffering and bloodshed. According to the legends, it sought to free itself from the confines of the triangle, and to do so, it needed to perform a ritual involving a human sacrifice, a ritual that would grant it the power to roam the earth unbound. I realized with growing horror that Laura was to be that sacrifice. Determined to save her, I returned to the Alaska Triangle, better prepared and armed with knowledge. I retraced my steps, once again finding the abandoned cabin. The journals were still there, and I spent hours reading them more thoroughly. The previous explorers had documented their own encounters, eerily similar to mine. With one exception, none of them had survived. With growing dread, I understood that the monolith wasn't just a marker, it was a gateway of sorts, a focal point for the Aluxot's power. I made my way back to the clearing, feeling the oppressive weight of the forest closing in around me. The monolith stood as silent and ominous as before, its carvings depicting scenes of horror and despair. I gathered the herbs mentioned in the ritual, using what knowledge I had gleaned. The air grew thick and heavy as night fell, the forest silent except for the whisper of the wind. I began the chant, my voice trembling. The words felt alien in my mouth, resonating with an unnatural energy. The hours passed, and I felt a presence growing around me. The ground trembled, and from the darkness, the Aluxot emerged once again. Its massive form loomed over me, those green eyes piercing through the night. But this time, something was different. Instead of attacking, the creature seemed to be waiting. Desperation drove me to continue the chant, my voice growing stronger. The monolith began to glow with an eerie light, and the carvings shifted once more. They now depicted a battle, a struggle between the Aluxot and a figure cloaked in shadow. I realized that the ritual wasn't just a summoning, it was a binding. The Aluxot, bound to the monolith by ancient magic, could be controlled, or perhaps even freed. With renewed determination, I altered the chant, focusing on the idea of release and redemption. The ground shook violently, and the creature roared, a sound filled with centuries of rage and sorrow. The glow intensified, enveloping the clearing in a blinding light. When it faded, the Aluxot was gone, and the monolith stood silent and dark. Exhausted, I collapsed to the ground, the weight of my ordeal pressing down on me. I had freed the creature, or at least broken its hold on the physical world. As I lay there, the silence was broken by a faint voice. It was Laura, weak but alive. I found her lying at the base of the monolith, bruised and battered but otherwise unharmed. We embraced, tears streaming down our faces, grateful to be reunited. We made our way back to civilization, the forest seeming less menacing, the air lighter. We couldn't shake the feeling that we had changed something fundamental about the Alaska Triangle. The disappearances might continue, but perhaps now there was a chance for redemption, for the lost souls to find peace. Our story spread, becoming a part of the local lore. Some believed we had vanquished the Aluxot, while others thought we had merely awakened a greater threat. But we knew the truth. The forest held many secrets, and we had only scratched the surface. The Aluxot's presence still lingered, a guardian twisted by time and suffering.